Hello and welcome to Think Dyslexia Network. I am Dr. Lauren, and today I have an amazing guest. And so I would love to introduce my guest today. So Bethany Hill has been actually an educator for 23 years and primarily has been in the elementary world. And she has been a teacher, an instructional coach, a literacy trainer, an assistant principal, a principal, and now is currently an assistant principal. She is also the founder of Joyful Leaders, which is a hashtag that promotes positivity and encouragement among educators. And lastly, Bethany is an equity, diversity, and inclusion advocate and an anti-racist educator. Thank you, Bethany, for being here today on Think Dyslexia Network. And I'm very excited to unpack this discussion about dyslexia and what it looks like in your home state of Arkansas.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So just to kind of outline for our audience, I want to kind of talk about just what some of the questions are we're going to delve into. So I want to hear a little bit about your school district's special education program as a whole. Very interested in that for me being a special educator. Also, I know when I visited your school district's website, there is a link for a dyslexia information screener. So I'm really interested to hearing more about that. And I really want to know more about, are your teachers trained to identify dyslexia and to remediate and support them? And as an administrator, how do you support families that have children that are newly diagnosed with dyslexia? And lastly, I want to hear all about Joyful Leaders. So let's get started. So can you give us an overview of your school district and share information about your special education program as a whole?
Absolutely. Well, my school district is located in central Arkansas. It's right outside of Little Rock, about 20 minutes. We have about 11,000 students, which for Arkansas is fairly large because Arkansas is a very rural state. So we're one of the top, as far as population of students in our state. And so we get a lot of Air Force base people, military people, because we have an Air Force base that's just minutes away. And so we have a large military population. So sometimes it can be really highly mobile too, because those, are stationed here for a few years and then they have to leave us. And so that's can be a challenge sometimes, but it's such a blessing to have that level of diversity and, exposure to people who are coming from all over. And so I really love that. But our special ed program in our district is, I think it's something that a lot of people look toward from smaller communities moving to our area, because we have a lot of options for placement for children. We have, of course, the least restrictive environment in the general ed classroom with resource support, and then we have behavior labs in our built in our districts too, that support students who are battling some, whether it's behavioral conduct disorders or some mental health battles and things like that. And then we even have a more restrictive environment that supports therapeutically. And of course, we have medically fragile community-based instruction classes, and then our self-contained settings. And so like in the school that I'm at right now, we actually have, we offer the resource setting, but then we also have our community-based instruction class. And then we have two classes that are that self-contained setting where they're very small, a small setting with multiple adults, and they're both such great classes, but look completely different. And so it's great to have two of them to be able to group, by grade levels, to where kids are, with their peers more and things like that. So it's not all districts have that. And so I feel very blessed, for sure to have that right in our building. And we can meet the needs of a lot of kids that don't have to leave our building to go to a different school for a different placement. So that's really cool.
How many elementary schools are in your school district?
We have 9
Okay.
total.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
So when I visit your school district's website, there's a tab on the main page called Explore, and there's a dyslexia information link. Can you talk more about the dyslexia screener and interventions, or Act 1039?
Well, um, several years ago in Arkansas, the dyslexia, there was a dyslexia advocate group that was mainly full of um, guardians and parents of students. And they pushed really hard in legislature for there to be laws that protect students with dyslexia. And, at the time it was scary, and a lot of people just didn't know what was going to happen. And looking back on that, that was around I think that was in like 2014, 2015 when all of that started to happen. And now here we are in 2021, and we have like a full, basically platform for students with markers of dyslexia, who don't have to have a diagnosis, but we can see those markers, as a school. And so we have a dyslexia resource guide that our state created, our Department of Education, and it basically requires every public school to have screeners in place in kindergarten through second grade,
Excellent.
that will identify markers of possible red flags
Great.
for dyslexia characteristics. And of course, we have to be very careful in our verbiage, because we can't diagnose, dyslexia, because that's not our field.
Right.
But we can look at some of the educational practices that will align to those markers of dyslexia that we see in certain kids, and set up a better opportunity for them to be successful as a reader,
Mhm.
and ultimately in everything, because our students who have those characteristics of dyslexia, they may start out with a really big love of school and eager to learn, but as things get harder for them, and as they start to switch from learning to read to reading to learn,
Yeah.
often they just hit that brick wall, and things get really hard, and their disposition can change. Their whole social emotional status can be affected. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so it's not just a neurological, effect of the brain. It also affects so much of their lives. And if we could intervene early and identify those markers and start to target specific
Right.
instruction to those, we can help kids get through those struggles early. And the earlier we intervene, of course, the better, because there are less habits to unlearn at that time.
Right.
So those screeners are universal, and everyone in our district gets the same screeners. And so other districts may use different screeners, but they're all approved by our Department of Ed. So
Okay.
depending on funds and just location and things like that, we do have some freedom there, but our district is 100% aligned on what we administer at the floor, like when we get ready to start the process. So that's really great, because we can compare our data in our geographical area and look and see who, has those at risk,
Sure.
tendencies. And so that's kind of how we get started at the
Right.
beginning of the school year every year.
Right. Well, I want to touch on something you said, because I really think it's critical for our audience to hear this. Dyslexia does not just impact your reading comprehension, your writing. I mean, it impacts all aspects. I mean, I always communicate this as it's a language based learning difference. So people don't realize that language is body language. Language
Right.
is interacting with your peers, picking up on jokes, relationship building, especially as you get older. A lot of parents that are unfamiliar about dyslexia, and maybe they're dyslexic and didn't know, don't realize that this impacts their adulthood. So,
Yeah.
like you said, the early intervention is huge.
Mhm.
So that leads me to my next question. Are your teachers trained? I know you talked about the screener and the language and all of that, and they can't diagnose, which obviously you guys aren't psychologists and neuropsychologists, but what kind of supports do your teachers do to help remediate or do interventions for students that are identified?
Well, they actually, teachers in Arkansas are now required to have really in-depth training in the science of reading, and so that's been a great first step.
Yes.
because that's aligned our educational system in our state by making that a priority. And of course, some districts can make that happen so easily, and because they have more resources. Some can't, but they have that support from at the state level because it's embedded into law, that every teacher have that training, and they get recalibrated, after they've had it. And so that started about 3 or 4 years ago. And so, like right now, in my building, everyone has been trained. And so this coming fall is supposed to be the year that they are held accountable for that proficiency because they've had time to implement.
Okay.
Of course, COVID has interfered with a lot of that. And so it could get waived another year because not everyone in the state has been able to have access to that training, mainly because of schools having to shut down in the spring. And so, and they don't like to do those trainings virtual because it's
It's
so
hard.
intense.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very difficult. And so, as an administrator, I had to go through assessor training, and it's just a different lens of looking at those different areas of the science of reading, and knowing how to pinpoint and see that in the classroom in different grade levels when we go in, because the science of reading it needs to show up in every content, because
Yes.
even in content reading, you should see etymology and morphology and vocabulary and listening comprehension and all of those things happening and taking place, not just when we're doing reading instruction, during the reading instruction block. And so that has helped teachers to be able to maximize their instruction, not just in reading time or in small group reading time, but beyond that. And so we've had a huge learning curve because we switched from complete balanced literacy, comprehensive literacy. We were very much readers workshop, writers workshop district, and switching from that to the science of reading and being, it's so different, and it was painful. I mean, I will tell you, when I first,
Growing pains.
yeah, when I first started going through the training, which we call RISE, we call it RISE training in Arkansas. It's Reading Initiative for Student Excellence.
Okay.
And within that RISE initiative, it includes a lot of things, because it's even community involvement and, family engagement and things like that. But the science of reading is part of RISE, and exposing our teachers to that. So when I first started going through, I mean, it was just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I don't like this. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was rough. And I remember after about day 4 of training, because it's pretty extensive, it takes a
Yes.
couple of years actually to get through it. It's like 30 to 36 hours of training. And so they don't slam us with it all at once. It spreads out, so we have time to process it and practice and, implement. And but I remember after about day 4, I just wanted to cry, because
Yeah.
all I could do was think back on all the years that I knew I was a good teacher. I knew I was effective. I knew
Right.
my kids were learning to read, but these little faces popped in my head of, that's why this kid didn't make as much progress.
Right.
This is why I wasn't capable of teaching. I didn't even know some of this stuff existed, and if I could have had those tools back then, I could have, really made a difference in some kids that
Yes.
were meeting, some really big barriers, of moving forward. And so it's almost like a mourning process that we had to go through. We had to be sad because we said goodbye to guided reading
Right.
and shared reading. And we had to be sad because we realized, oh my gosh, we have really kept kids from
Right. From that growth.
very important content. Yeah. And so the shame and the guilt that went along with that too, with a lot of us, but then, I mean, we kind of had to, get our big girl pants on and say, hey, that was then, this is now, we know better. Now we have to do better. We have to figure out better ways to serve our kids. And so it's definitely been a huge shift, and definitely a painful one, but we're getting to a point now where we're implementing a new program, and we have decodable text, and we have the resources around us, and we're starting to see it make a difference in our kids. So our teachers are able to pick up on, they have a very explicit phonics program now, which we did not have before. So they're picking up on a lot of deficits in phonemic phonological awareness that we were probably missing.
Right.
That. And then that aligned with the screeners that we do, it just makes kids pop immediately. And when teachers see that, then they come to our child advocacy team that we have here on campus. That's something that we do here at my school, and they can talk to the team about, I need to refer this student, for something. I don't know what it is, but I'm very concerned. I don't know if they need tier 3 instruction. I don't know if I need to change my intervention in the classroom.
Right.
I need help, and so that way teachers aren't on their own having to make those decisions. And I think that's been very powerful, because they can't do it by themselves. When we have to get more diagnostic and really dig into what's going on with a specific kid, we have to have more eyes on that student than just the classroom teacher. And so that's what has helped, I think, us identify some kids that we probably missed before.
And I feel like you touched on so many amazing things that, first of all, I want to let teachers out there that are, know that if you're watching this, it's not your fault.
No.
Like a lot of things that I kind of, I truly believe that universities aren't teaching. They're pre-service teachers about dyslexia and identification and all of those areas that you just touched on. And for me personally, I had the opportunity and the joy of starting my career with an Orton Gillingham fellow and have structured literacy. That's all I knew. And so when I moved into the public school world, I was a little confused because I was like, wait, what do you mean you don't know about structured literacy and Orton Gillingham and the multisensory approach? So I really applaud you and your school district for, like you said, it was hard. It was kind of acknowledging like, this is difficult, but realizing you kind of have to make that shift. And I think that really is that critical component to getting those scores higher and identifying, that social emotional piece as well. So
absolutely,
that leads me to my next question, which I feel like you kind of answered that, but I want to know more about how you support the families, like those families that are coming to you, like, I just got this diagnosis. What do I do? So what do you tell them?
Well, when families come in with a report, one thing about those reports is they are extremely diagnostic, and I feel like, oh my gosh, a lot of the work on the front end is done for us. They've identified where those specific areas of concern are. And sometimes what I suggest is for the family to share those reports whenever they get them, and get that, whether it's a dyslexia diagnosis or something else, to share those reports, because a lot of times there are there's achievement information in them, and sometimes there's social emotional information or even mental impairments, with ADHD or something like that too, that executive function, sensory processing, some of those things. And so it helps us pinpoint where we need to start with a child. It can also help us determine, do we need to look at special education services, and serve in that area, or does this child need to be served with just dyslexia intervention and then have accommodations in the classroom that will help them be successful? And so either way, they're going to need accommodations, but the way we go about it could look different for different situations. And so that's why I always encourage, families, as soon as you get that report, let's just sit down and talk through it, and we can look at options, because there will be needs that we have to meet here, on campus. And so we explain about 504 and IEP and what the differences are in that, because it's all so gray and ambiguous. When they look it up online, it's like, it's too much. And it's just terrifying to some families. So I'm the 504 coordinator for our campus. And so I can help walk families through what that looks like versus what an IEP may look like. and then how that will support and protect them
Mhm.
as long as they need it to, basically.
Right.
But the biggest thing is encouraging families that it's not a placement forever. It's not something that's going to dismiss them from a group of people.
Right.
It's not going to um, place a stigma, on their child, because a lot of our families have some really negative experiences
Absolutely.
with special education in the past, and or they've just seen their people that they love go through some really difficult
Tough times.
times. Yeah. And I feel like now we're more inclusive than we've ever been, but we still have a long ways to go with that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and being more open about having a learning difference,
Difference, right?
and that it's not necessarily a disability, even
Right.
though it may be labeled that way on paper.
Right. For the
So,
legal aspect. Yes. Yes.
yeah, because everyone learns differently, but when we have those diagnostic achievement tests and we can really see how a child is processing and at what pace and things like that, and then whatever is the barrier, then we can try to figure out ways to get around it. And it may take multiple tries, even, and it may take multiple
Right.
people to
Yes.
support one kid, but we can't do that until we know what's going on with them. And so when they come with that diagnosis, I just want to make sure that they are welcomed with it, and that
Sure.
it's okay for them to have this diagnosis, because it actually will protect them
Absolutely.
and help them get the support that they need to move forward, whichever route we decide to go.
Sure. So, in terms of the IEP, does your school district put dyslexia on there as an identification code?
They will. Whenever a child is already placed with an IEP, like we see a lot with students with a speech language impairment, maybe they may come later, a couple of years down the road, and excuse me, we start seeing markers of dyslexia.
Hmm.
And so we would go through the student's IEP and get consent for screening. And then if the child qualifies for that, then we would probably just add dyslexia intervention onto the IEP. So a special education teacher might not serve that student, but a dyslexia therapist might, or a dyslexia interventionist. I'm sorry, we don't have therapists, but we have reading interventionists that are trained in depth on dyslexia programs and doing intervention for students that have those markers. And so it depends on what services they already get,
Sure.
or if they're going to qualify for other content areas, maybe. Sometimes we can look at special education being able to serve for dyslexia as well. It's not technically a category in Arkansas, and that's what's been so vague about
Right.
dyslexia. People just way in the past are like, well, you know, we just don't want to even admit that it's real, you know,
Right.
because it's not listed as a category under
Sure.
specific learning disability. So, it's just in the last few years that it's become really in our face, and it needed to
Mhm.
be. Like, we needed the wake up call to
Absolutely.
to be more open to serving kids that have those markers, because it's more common than not
It is.
almost now. And even kids, what's great is that instruction that targets those markers of dyslexia is great instruction for everyone. So our
Exactly.
kids that don't learn as differently, that they maybe fit more of that mold that we've always served in the past, like
Right.
that middle, um, they're going to benefit from it too,
Absolutely.
and become stronger. So it's really good. It's just really good practice
Hmm.
and good ethical, equitable teaching for everyone. So,
Exactly. No, I really appreciate you giving some insight and feedback about what your school district looks like as an administrator and touching on dyslexia. My last question, because we're coming to the end of our interview, unfortunately, I want to hear more about Joyful Leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it came to be?
sure. Well, it started out just in my journal several years ago, and I write a lot and have probably, well, actually probably 80% of what I write never goes anywhere. Like it's in a notebook or it's in a Google Doc or whatever, but I do like to blog sometimes and guest write and things. But Joyful Leaders was one of those, just sort of a doodle on the side of the journal page one day. And I was, fairly new to Twitter at that time. I'd been on Twitter a couple of years and really started to understand how hashtags work and how they
Right.
archive a conversation,
Mhm.
or when you're looking for something specific, hashtags are a way to find it. And so I thought, And so I blogged about it and just decided that can be just kind of my brand, kind of what I do. I'll add it to the end of my tweets and I'll maybe use it on Facebook or whatever. And it took off, like it started spreading and people started using it. And so now it's like this network of people. And every week I'll see somebody new that I've never seen before, that uses the hashtag. And so I always go check it every day. And it's kind of become a group of just collaborative people who support each other. And if you scroll through the feed, especially on Twitter, you'll see people celebrating things that happen in their school. They may be celebrating the way they started their day with a 5-mile run, or the way they've switched to healthy eating, and it's making them be, a better person, a better educator, and a better leader, whatever it may be. But then all the way to things, sharing about equity and sharing about controversial things that are happening in our society, but in education too.
Mhm.
So it's just has a plethora of different um, uh, views and perspectives from all kinds of people. And so it's been really great. It's a great place to go just if you need a little boost, because there's always going to be a meme in there or something that will catch your eye and make you think. And so I'm looking back, it's been 4 years now, and
Wow.
I've seen it just grow and grow and grow, and so it's been really cool to see that, and to connect to all the people that have been contributing to the hashtag, because those are the people who've really made it
Yeah.
spread.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna totally be a part of that hashtag group.
Yes.
I'm new to Twitter. Like Instagram is more of my thing, and
Mhm.
I
It's
just
used
started.
on Instagram a lot too. A lot of people
Okay,
use it.
so
Yeah.
I will check
So
that out. And
yeah, I'd love you to. And you
yeah.
have so much to contribute to,
Oh, thank
because
you.
you push out great information. And so that would be, you could probably reach a whole new group of people by using that, and
Yes.
spread your passion too.
Oh, I appreciate that, Bethany. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're at school, so you got to get back to administering. Thank you so much. And I hope to maybe have you back on the show again.
Absolutely. I'd love it.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.